they started with the number 10 to fool the Russians into thinking that there were 9 more groups. Dedicate a beer to a fallen Green Beret. The first beer was done on our kitchen stove. It was a colossal failure. So the Longtab is the longest special skills tab in the Army. Being a part of something that's bigger than yourself, making an impact while not looking for the glory.
Dave, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
We're live from San Antonio, day 2 in San Antonio.
Yep.
Yesterday, I had the chance to sit down with the Green Beret Foundation. Absolutely awesome day. First time that I ever got to go there. But now, when I was getting ready to come out here, this has been on my radar for some time. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to get into it. We're going to tell a story of Longtab, how you came up with this concept, why you wanted to do it.
Right.
But I had no idea that you've only been around for 3 years, because the name is so well known. I see it everywhere, and I've been telling myself going into my 3rd year, if I ever go to San Antonio, I'm going in the Longtab.
Yeah.
Here we are, super excited. We have the Jedburgh beer,
Yep.
which was a great addition to this conversation. I had one last night, but thanks for hosting.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
We talk about legacy. We talk about the lineage. We talk about the brotherhood of the Special Forces.
Yep.
That is represented in this place before you even enter this door.
Yeah.
And we'll have a whole bunch of shots, but you feel it when you roll up and you see Longtab Brewing on the top of the building. You see the dagger on the door. The green consumes you of the Green Beret.
Yep.
But before we get into the details, we need to dispel all rumors for all of our listeners.
Okay.
When we talk about special operations, we talk about special forces.
Correct.
This right here is the home of Army Special Forces,
Correct.
the Green Beret.
Correct.
There's no Navy SEAL crap in here. Okay. We don't even have a whole bunch of Ranger stuff in here. All right. I don't want to hear anything about MARSOC Raiders or Air Force guys.
We have one
That's
Ranger
it.
tab up there. That's because Mike made me.
I'm with you, Mike. Mike's hiding back there. He's the master brewer. But I'm with you, Mike. I spent some time in Ranger school, not Ranger qualified in terms of being in Ranger Regiment, but Ranger qualified in terms of going to the school. So I do appreciate that. But this is the home of the Green Berets.
Yes.
And the Longtab.
Yep.
I want to start there because it's important, because we talk about the Green Berets, we talk about Army Special Forces. We always talk about the dawning of the Green Beret, though.
Yep.
Rarely do we talk about the Longtab, the
Right.
significance of the Longtab,
Yep.
the honor that you have when you put that on. So talk about the Longtab just in general and what it means, what it is, what it means, why we care about it, and then what that means to this organization.
Well, the Longtab is the longest special skills tab in the Army. And when I started home brewing, I was trying to come up with a name that would represent Green Berets and Special Forces, but it wouldn't be so obvious like Green Beret Brewing or Special Forces Brewing. I wanted something that had just a little bit of intrigue behind it, right? And it just so happened that the word Longtab has the same number of letters as brewing, right? So it made like the logo very balanced, and it looked
very
good.
symmetrical.
It does a lot for my OCD. We get that question a lot, like what the heck is a Longtab? And so, we point to it on the wall, it's everywhere in here. I think it's a great name for a brewery. And we also get a lot of people that say that, like, we think that the Longtab means you have a long tab of beers. Your tab is very long, right?
It might be when you walk out.
That works too, whatever works for you. Yeah.
We talk about preparation all the time on the podcast. Mm-hmm. We talk about the tagline of the podcast, how you prepare today determines success tomorrow. I was in here last night after we recorded this educational series with Green Beret Foundation, which I'm really looking forward to because we're going to get that out there. I really got to tell the story about what the foundation, you're a huge supporter of the foundation. We're a huge supporter of the foundation. But we've got to get the message out. We have to let everybody know these are the programs that exist in the Green Beret Foundation. This is how they're helping transitioning veterans. But we came here because I had to do my research.
Yep.
So I had to try the food. I had to explore the atmosphere when people were in here because we're closed now, don't open for another couple hours.
If you're going to do a podcast about Longtab, you're going to have to drink the beer. That's your research.
I had to. So I had a
Mike
couple
and I
of these.
do research all the time when it comes to like new beers, you know.
Well, you're canning today too.
We are.
And you're canning the originals.
The originals,
Hefeweizen.
Hefeweizen.
So Hefeweizen, what else is in it?
Tell
me about the story. Why the originals?
Oh, well, I mean, it's the 10th group was the first group.
The best group.
And Mike might argue with you.
Mike's arguing now.
He's the 7th group in the house. But, yeah, we knew we wanted to do, a Hefeweizen because it's kind of a ubiquitous German beer. 10th group has a lot of ties and lineage in Germany. So, it was a great match. The story and the beer style, it was, for us, it was pretty obvious. So, yeah, the originals, 10th group calls themselves the originals because it was the first group that was, that was activated. And, we tell the story both on the label and on our menus that, we, or 10th group was called, or they started with the number 10 to fool the Russians into thinking that there were 9 more groups, right? So it's a great story. I don't think you can get away with that kind of stuff now. But
I like to say it's because they had the power and strength of 9 groups contained in just the one.
Okay. Whatever works.
We went into the name of the beer, and this beer specifically called the originals, but the names of the beers are really important here at Longtab because every beer, there's a story behind everyone, and there's a story not only in the design of the beer, what goes into it, the brewing process, how it's actually going to taste when it comes out, but also the story is in the name of the beer.
Correct.
Can you talk about the process that you go through in terms of naming the beers and why that's so important?
Right. So, there's a couple of different ways that we go about it. One, it's, we knew that there was a body of names that we had to do, and then you try to match, as close as you can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's kind of arbitrary, but we try to match the name and the history of the beer to the style of beer, right? But, when you go down that road, you run out of stuff because not everything's in Germany, right? There's places in the world that you have to recognize. It doesn't have anything to do with German beer. But, yeah, part of this process, at least for me, and, Mike's been along the, going down this road with me too, is researching all these names, like doing a deep dive on SF history and coming up with these names that really are significant in the lineage of Special Forces history. Thankfully, we've got 70-something years worth of history to pull from. So it's important for me that the family tree of every one of those beers all links together. They all have a story that ties to each other in some way along this sort of historical timeline.
And in the names, some are names of places, operations, different history that Special Forces has gone through in their 70-plus year history. But there's also names of some of our fallen brothers.
That's right. Yeah. When I came up with this idea of Longtab, I didn't ask permission to do it from anybody. I just did it. Just sort of took it by force. And so
it's kind of like the Jedburgh podcast. I didn't ask anyone either.
You just do it. Thankfully, none of this Army stuff can be copyrighted. But you just, and I knew if I wanted to do this and represent, the history and culture and the regiment, there had to be some giving back because I'm sort of taking this thing by force. There has to be an element of giving back, and that's where the dedication beers and supporting our Special Forces specific related charities plays a huge part in our business model. So what we try to do is at least 4 or 5 times a year dedicate a beer to a fallen Green Beret. And that process is very important. We always start with the family because you can't, you don't want to just assume that the family's okay with it, right? Because these are very sensitive things. And so we start with the family, we get them on board, we involve them in the process of the name of the beer, the style of the beer, the picture they want to use on the can, all that stuff. And so when it comes time to release it, everything has been vetted and thought out, and it's, we've done 12 of them so far, and they've all been phenomenal. So big successes. In fact, we have one on right now.
Which one's on now?
Never Run from a Gunfight. Yeah.
What kind of beer is that?
It's a Scotch ale.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the kinds of beer, because you, in coming up with the concept, right? You got to start answering the questions. How do we do the beer? How do we do the food?
Yep.
There's a lot of beers out there. There's a lot of bad beers out there. There's probably a smaller number of great beers out there. I'd put you in the great beer one. But you said that you have a penchant for tradition, and you brew beers as close to the original style as you can.
Correctly.
So what's the original style that you're talking about, and why stick with that kind?
Well, yeah, this was something that, early on, like I wanted to do, but also, and Mike is on board with it too, is that there's so many phenomenal historical beer styles out there. We wanted to try to, so there was two self-imposed problems, right? A lot of breweries do all kinds of crazy stuff. We didn't really want to go down that road. We didn't want to be, adding things like, Pop-Tarts and cookies and all that kind of stuff in a beer, because we don't think that's a good representation of how good beer can be, right? And so we decided not to go down that road. The second self-imposed limitation is we wanted to use all American grown ingredients. So everything that we put in our beer is all manufactured and made right here in the United States. So that's important, and it's a really difficult thing to do when you focus a lot on these German and Belgian style beers, to not use the grains that actually comes from those countries. So it's kind of a it is a self-imposed limitation, but I think we've overcome that, because I think our beers it's getting really close to some of those originals that we love a lot, coming from Belgium and Germany.
So you're telling me this story here about this beer and the roots from Belgium and Germany, and all this process that goes into it. And I'm looking behind you at all of the vats and the various different machines that are required to brew at this scale and at this quality. But the reality is this whole process for you started when your wife gave you a home brewing kit, and it really tasted like shit, because that's normally what the home brewing kits do taste like.
It is true, yeah. The first beer was done on our kitchen stove, and it was a colossal failure. So being a Green Beret, you never want to accept failure, right? So you try it again.
We need another one of these kits.
Yeah, and then it's but literally it took over the entire kitchen. So my wife is like, hey, can I have a little bit of room to cook? And so I got booted out to the garage. I bought some more stuff, and then it just kind of grew from there. So,
and you brought Mike in as the master brewer. You met him at an SFA meeting there.
Yeah, we actually met at it was like an informal sort of after hours kind of a party, or like a gathering at one of the brew spots over there close to where he lives. And I forget who introduced us, but basically, one of the guys said, hey, Mike brews beer. So that's how the conversation started. Unfortunately, I don't get to brew beer anymore. I just write checks.
Which is really important. We talk with a lot of different business owners and entrepreneurs about structure of you talk about a command team in the military, right? Or you talk about partnerships in the civilian world and building businesses. And so often success comes down to their ability to understand their lane, stay in their lane, and execute well in that. And when you have conflict amongst partners at the senior level, it's usually because one is trying to insert themselves into the other's lane, and then that creates the friction point.
Yeah, thankfully we haven't had any of that here. The way that I see my role now, and it's all evolved, is I've been very fortunate. I've got some really phenomenal people. Of course, Mike, who brews a beer, extremely talented. And then I've got, Nick over here is our sales guy. He's out, pushing the beer around town, doing a phenomenal job. I've got another military spouse, Sarah, who runs our tap room. She runs it. She's just phenomenal. Can't say enough great things about her. Then I've got our head chef, Josh, and does some amazing work. I mean, he's really, single-handedly sort of put us on the map in San Antonio as having some of the best food that you can get in a brewery. But all of these things over time, I've got these really talented people, and my role is to give them the means to perform their craft. And so that's what I do. They come to me with a problem and say, hey, I think I can make this better if I've got this or if we do this. And so I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. And so my role is it's almost like an enabler. It's like I give these guys the tools and the means to do the best job that they can.
You started the business in January 2020. Which and you're laughing because you know where I'm going with this question, but you think about probably in eternity, there may not have been a worse time to open the doors of a hospitality-based restaurant.
Yeah.
Talk about the opening. But start with the excitement of the opening, right? Because this is a massive project that went into building this place, and it is exciting, as I said in the open. But also, as you said, 66 days later, you got a closed door in your new business that you just put all this into.
Yeah. We definitely put a lot into it. A lot of time and, blood, sweat, and tears, literally blood. And, 66 days into it, we got the order to shut down. And so we didn't have to close for business, but we had to close for customers. I'm like, well, that, certainly is not part of our business plan,
Right.
to be a package store, but that's essentially what we turned into. We had this little single canning machine, where you can manually fill cans. And we used to, like Nick and I would come in here and fill cans for like hours. And then we would sell a lot of beer online. And so people would come in and they'd buy a 4-pack or a case of beer to go. And that's how we kept the lights on, and we limped along, and until finally we could open up, 25% occupancy, and then 50% occupancy, and then 75, and then finally 100. And there was political motivations that were all tied into how all that was handled, but it definitely set us behind quite a bit. And I think we're just now sort of on a full stride momentum.
We talk about recruitment, assessment, and selection of special operators, and what we look for in the character of our Green Berets.
Yeah.
And you tell a story here, but you got to think about those times where you really need emotional strength, and you need drive, and you need curiosity to figure out a new way to possibly run this business, and you got to stay calm, and you got to wake up every day and do something, because you can't just not do anything, and the resilience that comes from that as well. My number one source of inspiration and motivation comes from my family, my wife and my 3 daughters. Can't say enough about them. I mean, they are my daily inspiration for everything we do. Every time that we have a new idea or like a new direction that we might want to go, that conversation starts with my wife, and then it starts with the kids, and then we bring then I bring the employees and the staff in. And so, everybody has their sources of inspiration, but for me, it's, bar none, it starts with my wife and from my family. Well, I think it's important, too, to mention that your wife's also a breast cancer survivor.
She is, yeah. Yeah, in fact, none of this stuff would be here if it weren't for her. I mean, she was going through chemo, and she couldn't leave the house. I was deployed overseas, and so she couldn't get out of the house to buy me a Father's Day kit or a Father's Day gift. So she was looking in a catalog and found a beer kit, and she goes, "Oh, this would be cool," because we met. When we first met, it was over a beer, So I was drinking a Guinness, and she asked me for a sip, and I was like, I've never met a woman that likes Guinness, So maybe I don't get around, maybe I didn't get around enough, but yeah, that left an impression, and then just, here we are.
Over 20 years in special operations for
30.
you. 30 years now.
I did 20 as an 18 Delta, and then another 10 as a warrant officer.
Well, we won't hold the warrant officer thing against you.
The first 20 were the best, for sure.
What's it mean to be a Green Beret?
Being a part of something that's bigger than yourself, making an impact while, not looking for the glory. The glory, I think, comes from within. And, yeah, I mean, that's in. When you leave special operations, and you leave a team, you still strive to look for that connection, that meaning and that purpose. And I think that, for me, this place helps me maintain that connection. The dedication beers that we have when the families come in here and the teammates come in here and they've got tears in their eyes because they see their son, their daughter, their teammate on the side of a beer can, and we're raising money for charity. That's an important connection, and I think a lot of guys when they get out still yearn for that connection, and it's a hard thing to do because when you're on a team and you're deploying and you're doing stuff, and then all of a sudden you're not, it's like, man, what now? So for me, this is that constant connection.
I was talking to retired Lieutenant General Ken Tovo.
Yep.
And he's been on a couple months ago. We did an episode with him, went down to Fort Bragg and did it in the Special Forces Museum, which they say that this place is a mini museum, and having been to
that's what they tell me.
Museum, it's not that far off. It really isn't.
Yep.
But we talked about that. We talked about how you go from living and revving at this, 10, this 1,000 RPM all the time, and then you stop.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're a 3-year person, if you're a 10-year person, 15, or you're a 30-year person. You get out, and the brakes get hit, and all of a sudden you're looking for that community. You're trying to find that group that you align with. What is that connection? How do I fit in? How do I do something meaningful that's going to give back and keep me connected with it? We were in here last night. I didn't know anybody in here outside of the folks from the Green Beret Foundation who I came with. I knew nobody in here. I left here with like 4 different business cards from different people, invites to a couple of different events.
Yeah.
And these are people that I never saw in my life. But you walk in, and you can spot another SF guy usually in an airport.
You can. It's we talk about this stuff all the time. It's like, how do you
But that's what it was when you come here. You've created that community.
Yeah.
And there's people right over back here. They're having a business meeting.
Yep.
Other people were here with their spouses.
Yep.
Others here were just here catching up because they knew each other.
Yep.
And so there's all these different groups of folks who come in here and now start to use this place as that safe spot for them to be connected back into the community.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I love seeing that. People ask us all the time, what's your typical clientele? And I'm like, it runs the spectrum. I mean, a lot of craft breweries, they are, very much involved in the craft beer community, and we are too. But we've got this extra benefit of being tied to this veteran community that we also pull from, right? That they may not enjoy. So yeah, I mean, you come here on a Friday or Saturday night, and there's 75 people in here, and half of them are veterans, maybe a quarter of them are from special operations, and then the rest of them are just that's just people that want to come and have a good beer and some good food, and enjoy a cool environment. So it is cool that we see people from from all over the place, veterans and Green Berets and people alike, that love to come here. It's flattering to me.
We talked about the beer. You brought up the food.
Yep.
You have an executive chef, Josh Gonzalez,
Yep.
who's a San Antonio native, I believe,
Yep.
has come in and really has built that. And when you and I were talking the other day, you said one of most proud moments that you've had in building this over the last couple of years is when you kind of walked in and said, hey, we're getting known for our food as much as we're getting known for our beer.
Yeah.
I had the Cubano. I had the pretzel. I think I tried the nachos.
Oh.
So there was a whole spread out there that I went through last night. But you said you don't want to serve bar food. It's not bar food in any way. But what's your vision behind the food, and why is the food component as important as the beer component in building this?
Well, just from a very practical standpoint, food sells beer. There's enough research out there that says that, tap rooms that have food sell more beer than tap rooms that do not. So we always knew that we wanted to have food, but in the beginning it was very minimal. You know what I mean? Actually, my daughter was working in here making pizzas. It's like we had the sort of the pre-made crusts, and we were tearing stuff out of the package. She did a phenomenal job as usual, but the food was okay. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. And then in the middle of all that, we hired a chef. It was actually the guy that ended up hiring Josh, and he took it, to a higher level. And I'm like, oh, okay, So, with him and Josh both, they said, hey, how far do you want us to go? And I said, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Yeah. And so they just kept getting more and more creative. And, our 4 to 5 item has now turned into 20, and then we do new specials every weekend. We've got specials Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And, it's, the food has become, as big a component to this business as beer.
Well, I caught the Wednesday currywurst too.
Yeah,
so I was pretty excited about.
Yeah,
that was absolutely excellent.
Yep.
The other component's coffee.
Yep.
You're the only brew pub in San Antonio that we know of that is also a coffee house.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised more people haven't. A lot of people that like good beer are also love good coffee. Right, so to me, I'm one of those, and we have coffee because I'm a coffee fanatic.
Well, you're an SF operator. You only have like one of 3 things in your hand. It's like a coffee, a beer, or some sort of tobacco product. Normally.
Oh, yeah, I'm waiting for Mike to chime in about the warrant officer coffee mug thing. But yeah.
Well, what would you do if you weren't drinking coffee and pontificating your ideas?
Beer, yeah. I knew that we wanted to have coffee. So even before we had our brewing machine, I had the coffee machine here, and we put it into play and would, make ourselves coffee while we're building stuff. I actually had it setting on a box, and we had it plugged in, and we were making coffee while we were building stuff. But, and I knew that we wanted to carry Green Beret roasted coffee, right? That was an important component for me, not just in coffee, at least from today's standpoint, but we try to support other Green Beret owned businesses, and so I knew I wanted to carry a Green Beret roasted coffee. And back then, the guy that I was closest with was Alex Wilson from Det-A Special Forces. So I said, hey, if I ever get a tap room open, I'm going to carry your coffee, and so we have since day one, and we still do today. And so he makes a phenomenal product. We carry his Gold Star blends, which is dedicated to fallen Green Berets. So it was a perfect fit for what we're doing. And now we've got another Green Beret-owned company called Tacuba that's here in San Antonio, and they're roasting all of our house coffee.
Yeah, I tell you, we need to get some of that coffee on the podcast too, because I crush coffee on this podcast.
Yeah, we've got plenty. Should have made some. Yeah.
We got the Jedburgh beer here. So, what is it? Talk about it. Why is it special? I know why it's special, but
well, this is a Belgian blonde, and it is probably one of the more popular Belgian styles. I knew we wanted to do a beer called Jedburgh. That just
you got it.
We just had to do it.
It's where it started.
Yeah, and plus, if you look at that, if you look at the history of Belgian beers, it's really in that, and even some of the Jedburgh teams, like the first Jedburgh teams jumped into northern France, southern Belgium, and so geographically, this beer style it's got a geographical connection as well as a SF historical connection. So, for us, it seemed to be a pretty logical choice. So, and it's our number one seller.
Well, it better be. There's some posters on the wall around here.
Yeah.
Recruiting posters.
Yep.
And I asked you what it meant to be a Green Beret, and I think it's really important because you have this quote from John F. Kennedy on your website.
Yep.
And it manifests itself in so many of the things we talk about on the podcast, but it says the Green Beret is a symbol of excellence, a badge of courage, a mark of distinction in the fight for freedom.
Correct.
And you look at some of these recruiting posters here, which are in retrospect, you think back to when they were put out in the 50s and 60s. They're kind of comical.
Yeah.
But it still holds true. It still holds true in I'm looking at here, and Special Forces won't make a man out of you because we don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you look forward, you continue to create this community. You continue to build this brand. You're becoming an example for so many and a mentor for so many other Green Berets who are looking to do great things post their service.
Yeah.
What's next for Longtab? What's next for you? And what's that path and that vision look like over the course of the next couple of years?
In the near term, when we touched on this a little bit earlier. When we first opened, the first year was just survival. The second year was, and a little bit into the third, the second year was more like, let's just see what we're good at, right? So we were brewing every beer that we could think of, throwing it against the wall, seeing what would stick. And, this sort of affinity towards Belgian and German sort of evolved out of that process. And they've done really well. And so this year, and we also started delving into some of the distribution, right? And so this year is going to be focusing on maybe not so much variety, but more of the things that we're really good at. This year, I think you're going to see more consistency. I think you're going to see, more of the more popular beers on tap. And I think that stability is going to serve us well. Excuse me. The other thing is, we want to look at, not necessarily opening up another brew pub, but maybe another tap room, another restaurant in other parts of the city. We're looking at a spot now that could be a prototype for some future locations. So we want to, I think we've got a great beer. I think we've got a strong reputation as a solid business and a solid company. So I think we want to, experiment with another location. So we're in the process of doing that now.
Oh, you heard it here first. Breaking news.
Yeah, that's right.
Jedburgh podcast.
Yeah.
I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
Well, when you're ready to go to Connecticut, let me know, and we'll you franchise it out. we'll set it up out there.
Connecticut might be a minute.
Dave, as we close out, the Jedburghs, we talked about them at length here for a few minutes. They had to do 3 things every day to be successful. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. Probably 3 things you've heard of over your 30-year career as being very important. But those are habits. Those are the foundations.
Right.
If you do those things with the utmost precision, then you didn't have to think about them. Their focus, their attention could be placed on more complex challenges that came their way throughout the day. What are the 3 things that you do every day to set the conditions for success in your world?
That's a great question. In the military, you always talk about, your, 50-meter target, 100-meter target, 300-meter target, short, long-range plan, short-range plan. And so we do the same thing. Every Monday here in Longtab, we bring all the staff together and we have a meeting and we talk about what's happening next week, We talk about what's happening next month, what's happening a few months from now. And, interwoven into all that stuff are some very practical things like, hey, we need to resupply on this, or we need to change this on the menu, or we need to do this. But the other thing is we also look at the calendar and look at some of those significant dates that are coming up to make sure that we're prepared to recognize those things with an event or, a special beer release or something like that. So it's, our plans every single day sort of involves, looking at those, those events and products and how they tie into SF history. And, for example, we've got SF birthday coming up in June, it's like, well, we want to do something big for that. That affects our, our long range plan here.
Yeah. You start planning for that now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Monday meetings.
Yep. I make notes every single night. And they always say, stay off your phone at night. But to me, it is it's every evening I sit down and I make a plan for the next day. And I look at, I've got a list and I use my phone. I use Notepad and I say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, those things like you're on the list, for Thursday. And so I make sure that I've got things in place to do, to remind me, because I'll forget if I don't. And I put it in the calendar, I put it in my notes, and that is my daily, that is my habitual thing that I do every single day, and it's ongoing as things pop up, bring in the notes, and I make notes to myself. And it keeps me on track, because there's, this is really like 4 businesses in one. You've got coffee, which has its own set of, challenges. You've got swag. We sell a lot of swag. Our gross revenue is in the double digits for swag, which is unusual for a brew pub. And then we've got a kitchen, which has its own staff and logistical problems when things run out and you got to change the menu. And then you have beer. So it's really like 4 things in one. You got 4 people that are in charge of those things. So it's like running 4 missions at the same time. So you have to stay organized and you got to stay focused. And so those sort of habits are what keeps me on track.
Monday meetings, notes every night, and you got to stay organized.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love all 3
and drink
of those.
beer.
And drink beer.
Relax.
And you mentioned the merchandise, and thank you so much. I have my Longtab Jedburgh Wings t-shirt right here.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'll be sporting that. Absolutely love it. Dave, the lineage of this organization predates us, even though you've served a length of time more than me.
He's counting.
He's counting back over there. Yeah. Mike's counting. But that the lineage in the community that we build in this organization is truly what defines us. Mm-hmm. You can walk into, we joked, we can walk into an airport and you can spot a SF guy, but you may be able to do that. But the important thing is when you walk up to him, there's an instant bond. Yeah. There's an instant connection.
100%. Yeah.
You're giving back to the community. You've given so much to this community in your own service. And now you've created this place, this location, this entire aura around an experience where people can come in and instantly feel that connection they feel at home.
Yeah.
In a time in our nation, in society, when the military isn't going to be the top of the fold anymore, and there's other issues that have dominated the news cycle, it's so easy to forget about the fact that we have Green Berets every day in over 100 companies.
All over the place, yeah.
100 countries.
Doing the good work.
Exactly. Worldwide, day and night, 24/7, 365, creating our way of life. And they will become more relevant in the time of no declared conflict than we have been over the last 20 years. And we may have given all the attention to all of our operators over the last 20 years, but the work that gets done now is the work that will define our nation for the next century.
Yeah, it's it's 1,000 small wars, instead of like one large one. So yeah, I mean, all that work that those Green Berets are doing, I mean, I wish there was a way that every American in this great nation, I wish they would be able to see that on the news every night, but at the same time understand if they did, then it may compromise some of the work. So it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's important, the work that they're doing, and I'm glad that all of that is still going on, is still happening.
It's been the highlight of my life and my career serving in this regiment. And
100%, yeah. In fact, just this morning, I was fortunate enough when I was a good friend of mine. We met in middle school, went to high school together. He was a year older than me. He went to the Q course, and he's still in. He just sent me a text this morning that he'd been in for 41 years.
Wow.
And he and I served on the same ODA together, And it's amazing how this experience that we've done has spanned generations and how much it's changed. And we were talking about the good days, like what was the best times for me. I said it before, my best times were when I was in 18 Delta. I loved being a medic on a team.
Yeah.
But some of those leadership qualities that I got out of the warrant officer course and serving as a detachment commander helped prepare me for something like this. Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful to be part of this lineage. It's so much bigger than me and really bigger than all of us.
Well, you brought up a good point here, too. I said it yesterday in our piece with the Green Beret Foundation. Special operations and special forces already puts the operators through an assessment process. And what's the most important thing that we're doing in the regiment is we're preparing leaders to be successful not only during their time of service, but post-service. And we're creating people who are going to be highly effective in any organization that they become a part of. And not everybody who gets out is broken and needs a handout and can't contribute to society. Yes, we have people who are affected by the things that they've done and what they've given to our country, and we need to take care of those people and honor them and give them every opportunity. But we also have a demographic of the population who can walk into any organization and be immediately impactful because of the experiences that they've had and the character that they displayed. And from an employer perspective, you don't even have to do the work on it because the U.S. Army already said that person right there is in the 1% of the 1% of most effective leaders that sit in this country. Why wouldn't you bring them in?
Yeah, it's true. And, it's one of those, it's one of those double-edged swords. It's like, not enough people know about what a Green Beret is. And we want that, we want to be the quiet professionals. But at some time, this, the concept of being a quiet professional also means that nobody knows about you, and so, what's the balance between being a quiet professional and doing the good work behind the scenes when it's important versus, being public and out in the open so that people, those employers and those companies and everything know who you are and what you can do and what you're capable of and how you would bring value to their company.
That's where we come in. Yeah. What you're doing, what we're doing on the Jedburgh podcast. We got to let everybody know.
Yeah. Yep.
Dave, thanks.
Hey.
Thanks for hosting me. Thanks for the beer.
Cheers. Yep.
American Jedburghs went out to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Director to the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As a former member of Special Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast donates a percentage of all proceeds to the Green Beret Foundation, supporting America's Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.